Thank you for joining us, everyone. Usama too.
Hello, hello everyone, and hello Romy.
I think we should start each one of these with a tiny little explanation of what this is. Deconstructing Islam, a live stream where Usama and I are helping people before and after leaving Islam, people that are struggling with Islam. We're also trying to educate the rest of the world about our problems, our situation, our troubles.
Mhm.
Today's event is fear of death. I think we'll be talking about other things too because they're kind of connected, but we're going to try to stick to just fear of death. I'm sure fear of hell will come up, but it's not the main topic. Fear of death is. Let me start with this. So this is the kind of topic where we can talk about our personal experiences and we can talk about it, how we experience it now, as both of us are atheists for the people watching. And we can talk about it, about our experience with fear of death when we were Muslims. I was a Muslim for 32 years. How long were you a Muslim?
Well, let's say I left Islam when I was in my late teens, so that would put it something like what you have, close to 30 years.
Yeah. So I never had a fear of death, and I still don't. I never gained it. I mean, first I want to try to understand even what people mean by fear of death. So what about you? Did you ever have a fear of death?
So the thing about it is that death in itself actually never really presented an issue on its own. It's
Always connected with other things.
yeah, but it's mainly it was and still is related to the end of life, as the negation of life, rather than death as a kind of a phase, as many people think about it. Because in all religious traditions, you will find that once you die, you're going to have this or this or this, and there's going to be some kind of an afterlife. So this concept of the afterlife is something that talks about death as a kind of a phase. So when I say, do I have fear of death, am I fearing the process of dying, which is likely going to be painful and hurtful, feeling that you're going to be losing this life? That's definitely the process of dying, rather than death itself, is something
Yeah,
that's
and those are two different things. I don't mind saying I have a fear of dying bad.
yeah.
I want to die nicely, like when I'm old in my bed and I didn't feel it.
Yeah,
Sleeping.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and I know there's ways you can die that is very scary and painful. That's what would be scary for me, is the pain.
I mean,
Really, it's a fear of pain.
we're meat bags.
Me,
We are meat bags.
meat bags.
So this means that there are so many different ways that you can actually damage us and hurt us in ways that can be excruciatingly painful and hurtful, can be prolonged for a long time, and can be short. So there are so many ways to
So I
go
think
through that experience in a bad way.
one aspect of it is, if we're going to try to connect the fear of a bad death versus just fear of death, people will have a fear of, you have a really horrible last few months or last few years of your life,
Mhm.
and I think they fear it because they don't think they can get out of it. Because, well, if they're religious, that you can't kill yourself, you have to endure it, and then finally God takes you. Or for atheists, there's lots of people who can't even conceive of the idea of killing themselves. They're going to wait for physics to kill them. Which it's either God or nature. Both of them are acting the same there. Where the way I see it, and before I say this, I want to say, this is just a theory I have. I can't say I've tested this theory. I don't really know, but what I imagine I would be like when I'm near death's door, and let's say it's extending, I will say, pull the fucking plug. I tell my kids that now, by the way. We'll be watching a movie and we'll see someone on their deathbed and they look like they're suffering. And I always joke, but it's serious too. With my kids, I want you to treat me the way we treat horses. Shoot me dead. Just shoot me in the brain.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's definitely the same thing I say, and I hope that when the time comes, that the mentality I have right now persists throughout
Yeah.
that time,
Yeah.
because when you're looking at it, there might be a lot of suffering going on, there might be a lot of pain, but at the
Well,
same
what
time,
people will say on top of that is, and they say this a lot, now you're not worried about it, but when it's close, everyone says this, or almost everyone advertises it, that even atheists will say and start praying to God.
oh, that's a different thing, I think.
It's
I mean,
related. It's
it is, yeah, it is related, but it's a different thing, because when you're at your deathbed, if you're starting to having some ideological qualms about your past convictions, that's not the same thing as having that visceral reaction of wanting and willing to end your life. These are, I mean, they're obviously related, because if you have some convictions about what's going to come next, it really makes a big difference about the steps that you're going to be taking next.
Well, how it's related is these people are thinking everyone has to do what they're claiming is happening. They're saying everyone, no matter what their past was, when they get to the point of you're about to die, everyone has this experience that they're talking about. And they're treating everyone as the same. They're not realizing, look, there's tons of people who don't have the mental framework that leads to this problem.
Yeah, yeah, and you can go see people who undergo euthanasia in all sorts of situations, um, and we're not talking about people in a coma. We're talking about people who are aware, fully aware, making an informed decision. Because in most cases, you're actually going to be signing consent forms that you are doing this willingly, and so on. And you can see that there are people who do that willingly, and embrace the situation that they have, and think that this is the best course of action. So it's not.
It reminds me of something.
Mm.
In America, there's this thing now. Instead of like when somebody dies, we have a funeral. It's everyone is sad. We wear black. That's the normal old thing. What I've seen that's new over here, and this, I'm guessing this is atheist families. I didn't ask them what their religion is, but I think it's an atheist family. When the person dies, they do a celebration of life.
Yeah.
They're not focusing on the death and what we've lost. They're focusing on what we had, the good of what we had when that person was alive.
Mm-hmm.
Celebration of life. They go out into the woods and do it there.
Yeah,
Returning to nature.
There are other cultures. I don't want to say it's South American / African, but I think there are certain places where the funeral is actually a celebration, with festive music, with
this is old culture.
Yeah, we're not talking about something that is
not atheist or whatever. This is old culture. And they probably had gods in their.
And I mean, I also would think that even from the religious perspective, if you want to think about it from the religious perspective, if they think that this person has followed whatever edicts that would get you into heaven, why is it that you are sad? If that's truly the case.
So let's talk about that now. What I understood from Britt Hartley, No Nonsense Spirituality, All the Tools, No Faith Required. Wow, I memorized it. That's really good marketing, by the way. If I can say it like that, that's really good. I think she had some help with publishers, or if not, it's fucking amazing what she's doing. Anyway, what I learned from her, and maybe I knew this before, I'm not really sure. So what she described was people have an inherent, and not necessarily everyone, a fear of death, not connected to any religion or anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what she's saying is that religions help curb that fear.
Yeah.
So, and now I was in a religion and I didn't have the fear of death, so that's not one that connected for me. And the point is, religion doesn't deal with just one thing; it's dealing with like 30 things. And so, if you think of the 30 things that Islam deals with or helps you with, each person doesn't have 30. Maybe I had 5, and fear of death wasn't one that I needed Islam for.
But fear. Let's actually probably not put it necessarily as fear of death, but rather the afterlife. And especially if you go back even a century ago, the prevailing beliefs of people is that yes, there is something after death, and religion happens to have the perfect recipe for reliving your life or entering into that phase of your life well prepared and living in a kind of a happy situation rather than a miserable one.
Let's clarify why it's happy and why it's not miserable. So this is the discussion I had with my mom about an hour ago. I wanted to get her opinion on some things, and she said some stuff that seemed very clear once she said it. So for her, her fear of death when she was a Muslim was also connected with fear of losing her loved ones. And the religion helped her feel better about that because she's going to see them again.
Yes.
And then during her 2-year period where she was transitioning from Islam to atheism, and maybe in between it was like, deism, agnosticism. She said during that period, she would have conflicting thoughts. And, one of them was being sad about having lost that, now I can't see my family later. So it's like the fear of death kind of increased a little bit. But she said the part that was on the other side of it was, and she even noticed this recently, because I got to tell you this. So my father has some troubles. Sometimes he has to go to the hospital, heart troubles. The hospital fucked up and told my mom, your husband died. For half an hour, my mom thought that my dad was dead until they finally came and said, oh, we made a mistake. It wasn't you. It's the other guy, the other family. Now imagine the other family, what they just went through. Anyway, so my mom had 30 minutes of experiencing, and this is, that somebody close to her died. And this is way after she's been, left Islam.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe it's the first one. I don't know. I didn't track all the deaths in our families. I don't know. And she had a positive thought, which is, okay, now he's not suffering anymore. That's how I see death.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not suffering anymore. Somebody else is not suffering anymore. Whatever it is, I mean, of course, there's death and accident. And, people say, oh, it was a short life. You could have done more or whatever. Let's say they're 30 years old. But if you're 80 and you're in major pain, I know both my grandmothers and my grandfather, they were suffering towards the end of their life. And yeah, for them, and my grandfather was so for it. He was waiting for it to happen.
Well, it might be. I don't know if you know the saying, but there is a saying about someone who has just died. It's not like good riddance, but it's something like I'm going to say it in Arabic because that's how it's usually said. ارتاح وريح. He is now in a better place and has left the people after him in a better place. So especially when we're talking about suffering that's been involving the person who's dying and their family and all the anguish and the issues that surround that. So yes, there is a kind of a relief. Of course, people who say that on top of it, they have that conviction. Well, we are going to be seeing each other at some point, and the suffering that happened here is then going to be rewarded in the hereafter, and so on. Now, for me personally, and I have gone through two major events of death in my life: the death of my mother and the death of a very close uncle to me. Um, the period of grief that I went through never at one point involved wishing to see them after death or thinking that I'm going to be seeing them
So
after
how
death.
old were you?
Well, that's the point. I was an adult. I was already I wouldn't say I was a full atheist, but I was completely outside of the realm of Islam. I wasn't religious. I didn't believe in Islam, but even if I
But you weren't
were,
sure about afterlife?
I had no conception of afterlife anymore. I mean, not in the emotional sense. I know that
So
people.
why would you think you're going to see them again? Or did I get
I didn't. That's what I'm saying. Um, but I also can think about when my grandmother died, and she was close to me, and at the time I was having my doubts. I was in high school. I really didn't think I'm going to see her again. I'm probably going to be sounding somewhat anomalous compared to the typical religious personality, because I probably it was very easy for me to transition because of things of that sort. I didn't really think that I was going to see her. I grieved her. I was really sad for having lost her, but I never actually, it didn't even cross my mind. It's not like I thought about it. It didn't even cross my mind.
Yeah, let me first say, you mentioned what the Arabs say about death, and you said something with the word murih in there or something like that. What was the
Yeah.
word?
ارتاح وريح.
So to me that sounds like peace, calm, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, in English, they put this on a tombstone. R.I.P. Rest in peace. We're resting and we're peaceful. No more struggles. That's the same thing what you're saying, right?
Yeah. However, for the case of Muslims, this is absolutely far from the truth, because for Muslims, it's not that you're going to go to the day of judgment. Being in the grave, you're going to actually go through
Well,
a lot of suffering if you're not
then
a
it
good.
sounds to me like there's two different lines of thought happening in the Arab culture. The maybe one is older, is the first one you mentioned, and the Islam one came later,
Well,
and they're competing with each other.
I would say probably you started talking about this as every person has a kind of an innate or an inherent fear of death. All of this stuff is there already. What religion does
Yeah,
is it builds upon it. It tries to address it in a specific framework.
yeah.
So these things do exist regardless of whether religion
So
is there or not.
so let me clarify why it's not inherent, but also why I said that word. And actually, let me say some comments from the chat. Mulhad al-Islam says it's the fear that keeps people in religions. Religions prey on the weak element of human nature called the wish to live forever. The wish to live forever. Okay. Is that some people do want that, but I think it's religions causing people to want that.
Let's actually think about this then from a historical point of view, and let's go back to the time of Muhammad and see how this actually got initiated. Because at the beginning, in the Meccan period, if you look at the Quranic Mecca from Mecca, you would see that there is threats of hell, threats of the Day of Judgment, horrors, and so on. But then when he moved to Medina and they started forming armies and trying to invade others and doing raids and so on, um, there had to be some kind of an incentive to make people go fight, because if you're fighting for two things. You're fighting for booty that you're going to be getting from the enemy, and you could potentially also fighting for a virtual booty that you're going to be promised to get in the afterlife. So that promise of that heaven as a kind of a reward, especially for fighting, that's probably pretty much related historically to how this got initiated in the context of Islam.
So I want to say why it's not inherent that people would fear death, meaning I'm saying it's not every human. It's not like a starting point or a default. But I also want to say why I even use the word inherent. It's because it's very easy to fall into it, just like it's very easy for us to have all sorts of psychological ideas that you kind of, again, are not inherent, but it's easy to fall into just out of sheer ignorance. So an example, psychological one that I learned really early, I remember thinking, you know, whatever feature you have about yourself, okay, other humans have that. And then you realize, oh shit, no, people are different. They don't all think like me. Maybe you learn that really early, and then you have to keep relearning it and better understanding it, and it takes decades. But like pretty much every kid gets that first idea. They're like me. And it's kind of like it's inherent, but it's not because of a fact of nature. It's just ignorance. You don't know anything yet. That's just a good first guess.
Yeah, let me actually say something about the biology of this, because if you're just looking at us as just an extension of the animal kingdom, animals don't have a sense of death. Animals fear pain, and that's what we also fear. So when you're trying to avoid a predator, what you're actually trying to do is not really save your life. You're trying to avoid the pain that's going to result from this. At the instinctual level, it's not going to translate as death in its own right. What happens in the case of humans is that because we develop enough consciousness about what kind of progression people have, we know that that death is going to happen. So there is that inevitability. And so we make that connection between the pain that results from there, the end of whatever situation that we have right now, the end of our life, at the end of the consciousness that we have. I think that there is something inherent about the human condition that is related to death. Fear of death as a kind of a constant fear might be a different thing, but the presence of death in the human psyche for all people is something that is there.
Let me argue against you by bringing up the earliest humans. And fuck it, let's go to the earliest humans, not necessarily the latest subspecies, Homo sapiens. Let's go back to the humans that 2 million years ago left Africa. Okay?
Right.
That led to the Denisovans and the Neanderthals, and then that was like the first wave. I think there was a second wave that left Africa again.
There were multiple waves.
All that merged to what we are now.
Okay.
People 2 million years ago, my guess, didn't have a fucking conception of death, just like the animals. Okay? They started to develop it.
It is something that develops. It has to do with consciousness to a great extent. I know that there are Neanderthals that have burial rituals that seem to have a conception that, well, this person has died, that there might be some kind of a form of an afterlife. But of course, that's all.
Yeah, so let's get into that. Very early on, easily 50,000 years ago or more, we start seeing people burying their dead and with objects.
Yeah.
And the theory is so that they would have them in the afterlife.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and this is like before conception of God. So the conception that we keep going afterwards, and you know, it's easy to think how someone could come up with that idea. You have a dream, you see your dead father, oh shit, he's still alive. And, you know, then they come up with the soul concept that would explain why they're in your dream. You know, and it's kind of easy to come up with all these ideas. And I think it makes sense that we would reinvent it multiple times across human history. Not necessarily one guy made it up and everyone learned it, you know. It's reinvented constantly. Yeah. And could be reinvented in the span of one individual now. And that's part of the point. You know. Now, so let's get into this. By the way, I had a nice discussion with ChatGPT an hour ago to try to talk about this. I first asked it, why do people fear death? And it said a bunch of theories. I heard them all. Then I asked it, why do people not fear it? Some people not fear death. And it said some reasons. And then one of the things it said, so I wanted to get into the extreme cases now, right? I already gave you one about try to imagine what humans are doing 2 million years ago. Let's think of a baby. A baby born yesterday does not fear death. So I asked ChatGPT, how does it start? And it says a few things. So then I say, so why would an 8-year-old child who is aware of death not fear it? And it gave a way that could happen. One of the ways is, well, they haven't really experienced loss yet.
Yeah.
Then I go further. Suppose this 8-year-old now experiences a big loss, whatever, their grandfather dies, something like that, somebody they care about. And the idea is now they might think about it for themselves too. Oh shit, I'm going to die. And they might develop this fear of death. Now, one way this could be avoided, I say avoided, it's not like we can really control it. But like 8 years old, I didn't have anyone dying. It wasn't until I was in my 20s till somebody close to me died. Yeah. So I was kind of saved from this experience where an 8-year-old with an 8-year-old mental framework of ideas experienced this loss. I was 21 or something. I was still a Muslim for another 10 years. But, I had already had a lot of more advanced thinking than a typical 8-year-old. And I don't remember thinking at all about, I didn't think about me at all. Or the part that I thought about me was, oh, now I can't talk to him anymore. It was kind of selfish, right? I was like, I got sad because I can't talk to him anymore.
Well, eventually, any kind of situation can be, no matter how altruistic it might seem, you can always see
Sure. When you lose a loved one, a lot of what you're sad about is the benefits you're losing.
Yeah, I mean, the person who died is dead. It's just that the people that were left behind now have that gap.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how you could be sad for someone that died. Oh, he didn't get to experience more of life. Let's say there was a lot of good stuff, but he's dead. It doesn't matter,
Yeah.
So then,
so if we want to actually think about the way that this would connect directly with Islam, it's definitely something that has to do with the repercussions of your actions in this life and how they're going to show up, whether it's first in the grave and then after that on the day of judgment, or after that when you go to hell or heaven. All of that is something that's very, very much present in the mind of every Muslim thinking about these things. I mean, for me, when I was a Muslim, I did fear hell, and that basically represented what I would consider the fear of death. I wasn't afraid of death itself. It was these things that
I would say those are not even the same thing.
Yeah.
But I do think there's people who fear death and fear hell, and maybe they're connected. One's causing the other or whatever. I don't know. But in your case, it doesn't seem like the fear of death was there.
Yeah. But here it's definitely important to see what religion in general, or Islam in particular, is doing. It's taking that original human state that has this fear of the unknown that would happen when you die, especially in an environment where, like you said, you see people from the dead coming to visit you in your dreams, or you go to the shaman and they in some way give you a drug that makes you see those dead people. So you have that connection that's there, and so religion comes and takes advantage of this. Takes advantage for its own reason, but at the same time, it gives you a way of maybe controlling it, because you're looking at it as something that's out of control. It's something that's going to happen. Well, how do you control it? Well, there's a recipe for this. You do this, you do this, you do this, and then when you arrive at the afterlife, you're going to live that happy, everlasting life. If you don't do it, you're going to burn in hell forever and ever.
So let me continue the ChatGPT discussion. So at one point, when I asked, okay, so suppose this 8-year-old had this big loss, and let's talk about the scenario where he doesn't develop a fear of death. I said, how could that happen? And it gave a bunch of stuff. One of the things it said was philosophical acceptance. So I said, expound on that. And it said, what is it here? The person has thought deeply about death and came to terms with it through reason. For example, they might see death as a natural or inevitable thing, like sleep or the turning of seasons. They may reflect that fearing non-existence makes no sense, since they didn't suffer before they were born.
As an 8-year-old?
I asked it about as an 8-year-old.
That's a little bit mature.
Yeah.
8-year-old.
I know. Sometimes it does stuff like that. But theoretically, imagine an Einstein 8-year-old. What do you think he was like at 8 years old?
I mean, the 8-year-old might still think of death as a kind of a sleep, especially if.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it gave an example reflecting that fearing non-existence makes no sense. I never even had those thoughts. I don't remember thinking about it at all, ever. Let me continue here. So this acceptance doesn't rely on religion or denial, but on a calm, rational understanding that death is part of life, not something to fight against emotionally. Even at 12, some kids, especially introspective or precocious ones, I think I switched to 12 years old here, can reach this view, often shaped by conversations, reading, or personal reflection. So I mentioned now, I wanted to get to me. I don't believe I ever feared hell, and I'm not sure why, but of course I have theories. I wanted to see what it says next. And it asked me, what do you think protected you from the fear? And then since I wasn't really sure, because I don't remember my childhood, I thought to mention what I did with my kids. So what I did with my kids was, how early was this? The earliest that they could, okay, so I was an atheist when they were like 3 and 2 years old.
Okay.
And, there's lots of good TV, nature shows. And I liked watching nature shows with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the easy thing to do with your kids, when there's not a lot that they know, They liked the nature shows. There was a lot of killing animals. And years later, I don't think they fear death. And I wonder, so then I called my mom and I asked her, so we're talking about this topic and I don't really know what you guys did with us. Why are we this way? What did you do? And she said she had a fear of death and she remembers thinking she didn't want to instill that fear in us. So she never talked about it. She almost never talked about hell or heaven. So I don't know. I don't really know why I don't fear death, and I wonder what is going on with other people.
I think that does actually make some sense, because if I want to look at the corresponding situation in my own upbringing, I would say no. My family did think that since they believe very firmly in what needs to be done in order to avert issues in the afterlife, they need to educate their kids right from the beginning that this is something that you have to be aware of. We love you, and that's why we're giving you.
So they made you think about your death often.
Your death and the consequences of what you might be doing now on how it's going and how it's going to be reflecting on the afterlife.
Right, so, which in itself can cause you to think about death a lot.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
So my mom didn't do that.
So that actually the emphasis of that negative aspect, and I'm not really saying that my parents were doing this as a kind of a bad thing and they were influencing me in a bad way.
No, they were doing a good thing.
Yeah, they in their conception, they are trying to help you the same way that they would educate you. Go and cross the road in the place
Brush
where
your teeth, so you don't get cavities.
Exactly. So they would give you all sorts of types of knowledge and understanding that they think is the best way to navigate your life.
And my mom went hands off.
Well,
it sounds like she went hands off because she thought, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to deal with this. So,
well, it might be that for her, the fact that she eventually left religion might tell you that there were originally some background that made that possible. So
yeah, I don't know what you mean or how far you're going back, but when she was 7, she wasn't in. She was, I don't know what class she was in, some sort of class, and when she's not paying attention. Let's say it's math class. She doesn't care about math. She's using her math book to draw. She's drawing a face. Okay. And they got mad at her, the teachers, and told her, like, this is a sin and God doesn't like it. And that was like the first really big conflict between her and Islam, because one of the thoughts she has was, well, why did he make me this way? Why did he make me like art and then also say it's illegal? So, and that was when she was 7. So does that answer your question? That's one of the things.
I guess it probably also has to do with the environment at home in general and the various experiences that she would have gone.
Her dad was a very rational guy. I think he was an atheist.
Yeah.
The whole time. He was a closet ex-Muslim. He went to school in Russia. They're very atheistic over there. He was a lawyer. He was a general in the Syrian army. He was very much okay. Here's another element. Emotions, get them out of here. We got shit to do. So I guess that could have an effect. Like, don't worry about the emotions so much. That can have a negative effect too, of ignoring your emotions. But it's rational first in that conception, in that family, at least with him as the head of it. It's rational first.
Yeah. No, that's a very, very different environment from what I could say about my own side of the family, especially. I mentioned that before probably, but my family on both sides has some kind of a religious undercurrent. So my grandfather was belonged to a Sufi order, and so they were
Sufi.
Yeah,
Sufi's pretty awesome among all the Islams.
I mean, that's the conception that you would get, especially if you think that Sufi is a sect, which is actually not. It's not a sect.
Isn't that just semantics?
No, it's actually mostly Sunni people who go into Sufism.
Why is that?
Well, Shia people have a completely different tradition that they would follow, but Sufism is more connected with Sunni Islam. So you don't say that Sufism is something on its own. It's not like a third stream of Islam. Okay. Anyway, what I'm saying here is that there was a kind of a religious background that was already heavily there. And so I would say it definitely trickled down to the next generation as okay, you are part of this. You have to make sure that you give this knowledge to your children. Otherwise, not only are they going to hell, but you're also going to be sharing some of that sin.
So what I know about Sufism is that, which is very little, is that it focuses a lot on spirituality. And what I know about Islam in general is it doesn't much.
Well,
it's not a main thing.
Okay, Sufism in its origin is not even an Islamic thing. It comes from outside of Islam. It's a kind of a mixture of different things that especially come.
Sounds like a bunch of people that didn't want to get their heads chopped off, so they're like, "All right, we're Muslims, but we're Sufis."
There was plenty of that happening at the beginning. Yeah, so there was a lot of people who did that.
So that's my mom mentioning that story that I mentioned about her when she was 7. Yeah, she was prevented from drawing faces because it was haram.
Yeah, that's definitely the reaction that you would get. You're not allowed to hang pictures of faces for the same reason that if you want to look at it, it's a kind of a relic that was inherited by Islam from Judaism, from the Ten Commandments, the graven images.
All right, let me put some more comments on here. There's a lot, okay? Read this. Tawbah, astaghfirullah. Please come back to, what's that?
Hajar al-Aswad, the black.
Oh, the black stone.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think this is recent news about, I don't really know, Muhammad Hijab and some, like, he was being abusive to his wife or something.
Well, yeah, misyar marriage is a kind of a temporary thing. That stuff is, I mean, it's frowned upon as a kind of a form of legalized prostitution. But
yeah, I'm aware of it. Yeah, maybe we should talk here. You know what? We should talk about that one day. Yeah, I'm gonna put that on the list we got. He says R.I.P. when translated to Arabic means torment of the grave, and I'm pretty sure he's joking. That's not exactly what it means, but he's saying the I don't know why. And then he's defending himself a little bit. No, not that message. He's thanking us. Guys, thank you for your amazing work. Keep going strong. And then keep going strong. I know right now your viewership is low. Hang in there. It will slowly grow. Thank you. And then he defends himself here. My comments are dark, sarcastic, and wacky, but have deeper meaning. I'm poking fun at all sorts of theological ideas, especially Deen al-Haq.
Deen al-Haq, the religion of right. Al-Haq means
Al-Haq means like the truth, right?
Truth, right. Yeah.
But what's the phrase Deen al-Haq mean? Because all Deen is supposed to be al-Haq.
No, there's only one deen for Allah. That's only Islam.
Oh, so they use that phrase as only the Islam one.
Yeah.
Like saying the true religion.
Yeah.
The true religion. Okay, I see. And may sound not serious, but that's not the case. He's defending himself. And then he said, when we mentioned ChatGPT, so what's this mean?
As-Sadiq al-Amin. That's one of the descriptions of Muhammad, the truthful and righteous one. So
Allah gets 99 names. How many names did Muhammad get himself?
Oh, so there's one hadith where he says starts listing his names, and there are 6 of them listed, although you can find in other traditions that he has a bunch of others.
And none of them overlap with the 99 of Allah, right?
No, some of them actually do.
Oh, so Allah has some ones that don't matter, since humans have it too.
Yeah.
Oh, why name them like that?
Well,
you should give Allah other names.
Well, what happens there, according to them, is that you're not supposed to say those names in the same sentence pertaining to Allah and the human that is in question. That's one way of
I don't remember getting that memo or getting that lesson. I must have skipped that day.
Yeah, well, that's one version of it.
My mom says, Sama, you got right on the point when you said that I was prepared without knowing. That is why I didn't talk to my kids of fear of death. I fear it, and I didn't want to instill this fear in them. Yeah, that's interesting. And my dad wasn't home a lot, and he was at work all the time. But even when he was at home, we didn't have philosophical discussions with him. My mom's more sophisticated than him when it comes to that kind of stuff. He's still a Muslim, by the way. So. Let's see. So connecting this with everything else now, And we have done that a little bit, but I think what happens to people, and this is in everywhere, not just to do with this topic, is they have a set of ideas as a package deal that the society is offering them. That's what religions are.
Yeah.
And it's take it or leave it too. It's all of this or none of it kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of the religions share a bunch of stuff anyway.
Yeah, but if you look at the structure that each religion builds, it's a kind of a precarious structure, like what you would get in a house of cards, that builds this on this on this on this. You take the package, you remove one card, and the whole thing is going to fall.
So here's the point: they don't know how to divide up the package deal. They're not good at that. So when they have something like a fear of death, it's packaged up with a whole bunch of other fears and ideas.
Yeah.
And they can't separate them. They have a difficult time separating them. I think that explains why people take years to switch from Islam to atheism, because it actually is taking them that long to unpackage the ideas, figure out what's good, keep them, improve them, figure out what's bad, get rid of those, have arguments for them. And it takes them years. And they're not really like following a methodology. If they did, they could do it quickly. I mean, I think I was, and I do in general, and my shit seemed instant.
Well, going back to that same analogy of a house of cards, if you're actually living your entire life in such a house, this means that if you want to get rid of it, and you realize how precarious it is, you're going to start just removing one piece and replacing it with something else, or just discarding it altogether. And so you end up doing things piecemeal in order to not cause yourself the trauma of getting out of that picture that describes everything in your life, and all of a sudden you're without anything.
Well, I think I am doing it in a piecemeal way, but it's piecemeal in the sense of, Aristotle had a good quote about this. I think it's Aristotle. I could be wrong about who. I wish I could find it right now. I wish I had it ready. It's something like, somebody that can hold two opposing ideas in their head and like contemplate them, that's a smart person compared to someone that can't do that. And what he's describing is the people that they're not philosophical thinkers. They can't, it's like the ideas in their heads are they have to either be true or false, and you can't have an in-between of, I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
And actually, that's partly why I wish Hani was here, because he's not an atheist. He's agnostic, he says. And I'm guessing he went through a period of like deism. And the point is, what's something we share, the atheists and people like Hani, is we don't need an answer to some questions for us to like feel comfortable. We don't need the ultimate answer in order to be okay. Where with the other group, they're really upset not having the answer.
Yeah.
That's why they're getting upset when they're leaving Islam.
Yeah.
Mainly.
So,
of course, there's family issues, but
no, I think you're absolutely right. The idea of certainty, the idea of having that place where you actually relinquish the need or any kind of right, essentially, to think, that's actually a very comfortable place if you want to think about it. You can just assume that, okay, religion has taken everything, taken care of everything. I'm not going to be thinking about anything of that sort. And so I'm going to be paying attention to other things that are more important. That's basically what religion does. And so it gives you a very simple prescription of what you need to do in order to get to the right place that you want to go, without having to think. So it actually does encourage you to suspend your thinking. That's
yes, and that has all sorts of problems because it leaks into other things.
Yeah.
The certainty issue. ChatGPT mentioned the certainty issue. and connecting this to fear of death, part of that is an uncertainty thing. If you have a fear of death, you're uncertain about, well, for one, when you're going to die. And also, for a lot of people, I guess, they're not sure about what happens when we're dead. Where for me, I'm sure. First thing I say to everyone is, your loved ones will miss you. And then they're like, well, what happens to you? Well, you turn to dirt and you don't exist anymore. And there's no soul. And you're not going to have thoughts. And you're not going to worry about it. And none of that. Go ahead.
I think that's definitely the case. But from the perspective of a religious person, whether it's a Muslim or not, again, it's an issue of certainty. You are certain that there is the higher entity that knows when you're going to be dying, where you're going to be dying, and how. And
I see. And your life is already planned, and whatever, if it was going to be good or bad, it's already there.
Yes.
You don't have to worry about anything, although it's not you that knows it. Somebody else supposedly does.
Yeah, but you know that who knows it is a person you can trust, or in the version of Christianity, it's a person who knows.
It's weird because
who loves you.
Who loves you.
and
it sounds like they're saying somebody's taking care of everything.
Yeah. Yes.
So don't worry about it because it's being taken care of.
Exactly.
But what exactly? Well, we're talking about fear of death again. So, things that people would worry about might be like, at least this is what I worry about, is dying before I gave my kids enough to be independent.
Yeah.
So I don't want to die for at least another 7 years. That's like when they're done with college and got jobs. There's uncertainty. I don't know when I'm going to die. I could die tomorrow. But here's what's interesting about this. I always tell my kids, I could die tomorrow. So we should, I remember talking to my oldest daughter kind of early. I don't know how old she was, maybe like 9 or something, 10. And I remember asking her, so what are you going to do when I die? And the first thing she says, cry. I said, okay. What's the second thing? She said, go get all your money. I was like, yes. You got to deal with the will, deal with lawyers. You have to do those things.
Yeah.
People's families fuck up a lot when that doesn't happen right. Happened to my mom with her dad.
Yeah.
And here's the point, the difference between the two groups, the fear of death and not fearing death. Not fearing death means we're actually dealing with the issues. And the fear of death is, let's not think about it. And that means you're not going to do things like deal with the will or talk to your kids about what to do when you die.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the implications. It can get a little bit more complicated, and you could have mixtures of people being in both camps.
Especially when you're transitioning.
Yeah, but the presence of an idea about what you might be physically doing, or having some kind of a plan for what you have in the event of death, that's definitely something that needs to be there regardless of whether you have fear of death or not.
So I wonder, are we done talking about fear of death?
I mean, it's a topic that's so wide. We barely scratched the surface, and
you have ideas in your head now, though.
From the point of view where we wanted to talk about it, I think we did discuss the various aspects that we needed.
Yeah, I don't have any more ideas. We might as well get into other things.
Yeah.
I actually forgot to put this there right at the beginning. For anyone, if you have questions, criticisms, comments, please chat. Please let us know, and we'll try to take your comments and discuss them next time. So please do make your comments, ask your questions. We'd love to talk about what we're going to talk about next week, but we haven't even decided yet. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I mean, we have a list of things that
And there's a few more things on it now, and we just added one a half hour ago. What was it? Do you remember? Damn it. I'll remember and I'll put it.
Yeah, I mean, there was some kind of a flag, a marker somewhere, but I don't remember.
Oh, well, when I watch this again, it'll come.
Yeah.
So the two new ideas, I don't know how important this is. There's a saying that people say, Muslims say it, non-Muslims say it. Who are you? That's how it starts. Who are you to say, and then whatever the thing is, who are you to say that your morals are superior to Islam's morals? This was in response to me saying, Muslims come to the ex-Muslim subreddit a lot and, ask us why we left Islam. And I try out all sorts of different things. One of the things I say sometimes is, well, I found out I'm morally superior to Muhammad. By far. Light years ahead. How the fuck am I going to follow a religion when I'm better than that dude? I'm better than God too. I mean, at least the Islamic one. I don't know about other variations people come up with. And this guy replied, who are you to say that your morals are superior to Islam's morals? People say the same question that starts with, who are you to say? When they're saying it to someone, oh, you don't have enough authority of knowledge.
Yeah.
Like you're not an authority on this category of knowledge. And it's just a question because instead they could be saying, you're not an expert, so shut the fuck up. They just ask a question implying it. Who are you to say? And I love the way I replied because I was like, okay, I'll tell you who I am. And I just start saying who I am and where I learned these things from. And
But their expectation is not only about you being an expert. No matter how big of an expert you are, if you are trying to judge something that was produced by the creator of the universe, that was exemplified by the best human that ever lived.
Well, we're judging whether even that's true.
Yeah,
anyway,
well,
back to the point though. Is that an hour's worth of talking?
I mean, yeah, I can also think of another saying that might overlap with this by Ahmed Didat, if you know him. So he was a famous Muslim preacher. He was South African, and he was very active in the 1980s and 90s. I remember we had videotapes of him debating.
I might know who you're talking about, but anyway.
He would debate Christians and show whatever it is. Anyway, so there is a famous quote that is attributed to him. I don't know if he actually said it or not. Let me try to remember how it goes. But it was trying to show how puny you are with or without Islam. That with or without Islam, with or without you, Islam is going to prevail. So that if you're going to be criticizing Islam, if you're going to be going out of the fold, we're not going to be losing anything. Islam is so much bigger. It's the same thing. You don't have the authority to criticize anything. You're nothing.
And let's be clear. There is no authority on any knowledge. Nothing. No such thing. It's a false conception that Aristotle made, that philosophers have been following for like 2,000 years.
And that's exactly one of the things that religious people want to perpetuate, because of the fact that if you have that higher authority that's going to give you the absolute truth, that's going to give you the only way to succeed in life, in the life that comes after death or whatever, it needs to have that authority that cannot be questioned. Certainty is really
so if we did this episode, we'd start with that question, connected to the more general version that everyone says, talk about Ahmed Didat, then bring up Karl Popper and say there's no authorities of knowledge. Sorry. That could be an hour?
Yeah, I guess so.
All right, next one. What held back the discovery of genetic evolution? It's nothing to do with Islam. No, it does, in a sense, because I'm thinking religions held back the discovery of genetic evolution. I was hearing from an interview between Richard Dawkins and Neil deGrasse Tyson, where they were talking about this, about genetic evolution, and Neil asked, so why didn't they come up with this before? And Dawkins said, they had the ingredients for hundreds of years before that.
Yeah,
and they didn't say it, but I think what's holding them back was their conception of God. And you could say even more. Actually, he said more. There was this thinking of essences or elements, or old ancient Greek thinking.
Yeah,
that everything was a certain way and could only be that way, and that prevented them from thinking in terms of transitions of species.
Yeah, the idea of speciation was really I mean, if they don't even call them species. If you go back to the language that you have in the Bible, they talk about kinds rather than species, and it's talked about in a very vague way that it's not even possible to define it very clearly. And that's actually part of what gets used even today in the rhetoric that is used by religious people, especially from Christian background, when talking about this against evolution. But yeah, I think I'm not necessarily saying that religion did actually hold back evolution in that particular way, because if you look at the kind of evidence that was available in terms of um, the fossils, in terms of the taxonomy, there was a confluence of things that made it possible at that particular instant in time to start thinking about evolution. But it wasn't even evolution in the sense that we know. It was basic Darwinian evolution that was based on natural selection and didn't have even a basis in genetics. Darwin did make some speculations about genetics, but even though there was some work on genetics that was being conducted at the time, what's the name of that priest? I forgot his name. I'm blacking out right now. That was doing that work more or less at the same time as Darwin. Genetics as such didn't actually emerge until later on. But right now, it's really hard to see how it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to say religion's causing. I guess I did say that, but the mental frameworks that brought religion, or held up religion and strengthened religion, was a philosophical framework that goes back to ancient Greece.
Yeah,
and I think you talked about this a little bit. You talk about this often, and I don't really understand it. Maybe one day we could talk about it more directly. The connection between, I'm going to write this down, Plato's ideas and Islam during
Aristotle mainly.
Mainly Aristotle.
Yeah, I mean, Plato did have some contributions, especially some ideas about the soul and something of that sort.
And we're talking like 1000 AD.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the Middle Ages, if you want to look at the philosophical / religious thought,
I think we should do an episode just on that. You seem to know a lot about that. We could easily fill an hour on that.
Yeah, that's religious thought.
Like Aristotle's infusion in Islam.
Yeah. So Ibn Rushd Averroes has had a lot of influence in transferring the knowledge of Aristotle, basically becoming an interpreter of his thought. And then you have, on the other end of this, you have people like Thomas Aquinas in the Christian world, who developed some of these ideas. And so you had this kind of parallel path that exists in the Christian and the Muslim world about implications of Greek philosophy and how it got integrated into religion. And that's to a great extent part of why you end up using the same basis that would eventually lead to the true revolution that happened in the Renaissance, in the Enlightenment, but at the same time, you're using it in a kind of a completely different way, and you're emphasizing the wrong aspects of it.
Well, part of the point that I'm trying to make here is it's a mistaken philosophical framework that they're building on top of to claim God and the concept that each species was in its form from day one. And I guess even the concept of the universe is static. Even physicists thought the universe was static. Go back, 125 years? Right? Before Einstein.
Yeah.
And even Einstein, before he came up with his theory, thought universe is static.
Oh, well, even after that, in the 1950s, you had Hoyle thinking that the steady state model of the universe could be a kind of a viable alternative to the Big Bang theory. In fact, he's the one that coined the term Big Bang, and he coined it in a kind of a derogatory way.
So, yeah, you mentioned Big Bang. I was already thinking of it. People use the Big Bang concept. Now, first, let me say the Big Bang was an alternative theory to the universe is static. Right? Yeah. But the Big Bang, people use that today to say, oh, look, that's the evidence of God.
Yeah.
Because look, that's the creation event.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So,
so they were using both frameworks. The idea the universe is static, and then that's a physics thing. And then the other one, like both of them, they were trying to use it for there's a God.
Yeah.
The universe is static or the God or the.
But the person who actually initiated this, Lemaitre, who was actually a Catholic priest, it might have been a Jesuit. Yeah, I think so. When he came up with the idea of the Big Bang, he was working in general relativity, so he was a physicist, but he was also a priest. The Pope ran with it.
What the fuck?
The Pope, the Pope ran with it. Well, look, science is finally confirming that there's an active creation, there is a God. We're all done. So Lemaitre himself warned the Pope that this stance is actually problematic and it has implications. That would be also an interesting thing to discuss at some point.
All right, so let's make a decision. What are we talking about next week?
I mean, we have several things.
Do we want to try and stay on the same theme?
Yeah.
Other issues people have that then religion helps them cope with it.
Let's maybe finish that area, and then we have other venues too.
But what topics are there? That the topic we did the last episode, or maybe the one before that, that was supposed to be summarizing all of them. But I know we're missing some still. We didn't talk about fear of death that day.
Yeah, and we also sort of skipped or skimmed through the idea of what's happening. The progress of Islam in Europe.
Yeah, and that's hard to coordinate with someone, especially when we change our schedule.
Okay, so let's then.
I don't mind switching around. It might actually have a bonus. Maybe people get bored of this same category of topics. So switching it up might help some people that are getting bored of what we're talking about.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I have no problem either way.
Let's have fun with this. Let's talk about, let's say, Big Bang and God and the creation event and all that, and Lemaitre guy. And I really like it because we're both into physics too, so we get to talk about it in that way.
Yeah. And then there's plenty also to talk about when it comes to evolution and how it gets interpreted. So that's also some. So if you want to think about it from a chronological point of view, if you want to follow, for example, the first books of Genesis and how it started talking about creation, and then that creation of the universe and what it actually means then morphs into the creation of everything, including human beings. So there is a kind of a progression talking about the Big Bang and then evolution.
Let me connect it to something else then. And this is actually back to the main point. We're trying to help people right now. We're trying to help people who have these struggles that they're using religion to cope with. So let's name two of them that I talked about with Britt Hartley. I'll use these two words: awe and transcendence.
Yeah.
That does lead. It led me to believing in God. By the way, when I saw I was amazed by the universe. Okay, I'm in awe, and it does this thing. I never thought of it this way, but other people talk about it this way. How do they say it? The people that are depressed, or at least a category of them, they're kind of self-absorbed, only thinking about themselves, their pain, all the bad shit happening in their lives. And when people are thinking outside of themselves, like I am with physics, and like you do with physics, you're not thinking about the small shit. I'm not thinking about me, my life. I'm thinking about the whole fucking universe, all the humans, all of biology on Earth and every other planet. It's fucking ginormous. When I do that, I'm not thinking about, oh, I got a bill to pay I haven't paid yet, or I didn't go to the gym just now, or unless my back starts hurting while I'm talking, I don't know. It doesn't come up. So awe and transcendence, it can lead, even having the experience, people don't know how to explain it with their atheism, their version of their worldview, which doesn't have a God in it. That worldview doesn't help them understand, I don't know, various things, I guess. I don't know. For me, though, like, I never felt like I needed an explanation about these things. I'm not really sure why people do. And maybe it's that certainty thing.
I think this is something that people can experience very commonly without or with a religious context. The problem with religion is that this gets morphed or adapted in order to address this kind of general scenario that you have within religion. And so in my view, it actually deprives you of some of the actual raw experiences that you would get of nature if you didn't have this religious framework. But in religion, then it changes then into other things that merge into prayers and meditation and things of that sort. So I personally have no ability to connect with those, but I know that religious people value them and extract value from them.
All right. Let's hurry up and finish. I got to get going to pick up my daughter. Please like, subscribe, and share. And please suggest topics or call in. We're gonna have links in the description. And I guess that's it. Let's go ahead and stop. And Usama, stay on for a couple seconds.